Hey, welcome back to Common Sense OT Security. Last week, Dale Peterson posted an article on LinkedIn that I believe is very much worthwhile discussing because it points to OT security's elephant in the room. Well, what could that be? Well, so the elephant is something that everybody sees, but nobody dares to talk about. And Dale makes an attempt at starting such a discussion. Certainly, if you know Dale, he is always very diplomatic. He doesn't rub it in your face as I sometimes do it. He's a little bit cautious. So the headline of the article is, "What is the true level of OT security?" And he reflects a conversation that he had on LinkedIn and also in other scenarios where Dale basically says, well, there aren't really as many real OT cyber physical attacks as we are getting told over and over again. And I urge you to read that article on LinkedIn. Now, the interesting point here is, there are a couple of interesting points, but what I like about this article in the intro, he makes it very clear what he's talking about, because you will see that in the preceding discussion, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of OT security experts who just tell you, no, he's wrong, there are so many attacks. And in order to sharpen the argument, he comes up with two stipulations, which you can read here. So the first stipulation is that ransomware and other causes of outages on IT cyber assets are the largest cause of outages in the ability to operations to deliver a product, blah, blah, blah. So in other words, from what we have been discussing the last couple of years, it was mostly ransomware that did not affect OT systems. So that is his first stipulation. And the second stipulation is OT that is accessible by anyone on the internet, OT that can be found by Shodan, etc., is at great risk, blah, blah, blah. And so that is basically his setup here. And that is very much aligned to what I have been telling you for the last couple of years, that if you look at actual confirmed cyber physical attacks, where the target was not exposed to the public internet with no real access control, and or the consequence was minimal or non-existing because it was just an attack attempt that was thwarted by the asset owner, okay? And then if you use this lens, you will figure out, well, that's just a handful of attacks over the last decade, or you can go even further. You can go 2 decades. The number really doesn't change. And that surprisingly creates issues for so many in our field. And I have to say, I was a little bit surprised, because if I go back in time for my own history, 2010, when I did the Stuxnet revelations, I was scared to like hell. So, and I was trying to educate people, the general public, politicians, policymakers, etc. Oh, this is going to be really bad. And only to find so disaster didn't strike. And now I think the interesting observation that I made was, well, that's great. That's great. So we still have to do our job as OT security experts. If I would see it any other way, I would no longer be in that field, right? So I would have just switched to a different occupation, but here I am still alive and kicking. I just draw different conclusions from this fact. So just as an example, with our product offering, we try very hard to also cater to use cases beyond OT security, so like with engineering and maintenance. But others didn't follow that thought process. And this has led to this elephant in the room scenario, which I believe creates a lot of grief. And today, what I'm trying to do is I want to give you an explanation why this is happening, what we are seeing in the market. And in order to do that, I'm using my expertise as a certified psychologist. So we are going a little bit into cognitive psychology, and I will explain to you why you see all the fear mongering, etc. So just quickly looking back, I think everybody in our space has seen these timelines where you see, all those cyber physical attacks, and it's so many. And first, this is not true, because usually what you see is around 10 alleged cyber physical attacks over the course of 10 or 15 years. And if you take a closer look, then you will see something that Dale had already pointed out. Well, some of these alleged attacks resulted in trivial damage. So let me give you an example. The New York Dam floodgates compromised. I can only hope, if you're in our space, you know right away this is BS. Because that was just a tiny little floodgate in upstate New York. As I have told you many, many times, you can check out the pictures of that small little floodgate, and you will see no damage done. Then you see, and we had the same thing with that Norwegian dam hack just recently. No damage was done. And then you have a ton of other incidents, like the Maersk Pharma global production shutdown, or the what you see in Shamoon, as you see it in other timelines. IT attacks had nothing to do whatsoever with OT. And finally, the Aurora generation cyber attack. That was not a cyber attack. That's so ridiculous that was an experiment by the Idaho National Lab. So this is what everybody has seen. And from these, let's just say, 10 incidents, you will see, according or reflecting Dale's stipulations, first, no OT was compromised. Second, there was no real damage. And third, maybe some involved, like the recent Norwegian dam hack involved OT systems that were exposed to the public internet without any decent access control. And I would also add another criterion that I believe is very, very important, and I'm surprised that Dale didn't mention. Well, he mentioned it between the lines, I would say. It should be confirmed. It should be well documented, because in his exchange with Robert Lee, you hear that. I think it's a nonsense argument. Oh, but all the things we see, what we cannot tell you about, just trust me. No, so much is going on. Guess what? I don't trust you. I have no reason to trust you. And there is always the opportunity for those companies, for the OT security vendors, to show us some sanitized evidence. Show us the attack code, for example, right? Show us the firewall logs. You can sanitize them. Give us a detailed account of what happened. You don't need to mention who the victim is. But that certainly doesn't happen, and that doesn't add to the credibility of the whole industry. So therefore, I no longer pay any attention to those alleged attacks for which we have zero confirmation. I think you should do the same. You should simply ignore those. So now let's try to explain what's going on here. I'm trying my best now as your clinical psychologist. So we start out with a fact. The number of actual cyber physical attacks is extremely low. If you just consider the vast number of OT systems out there, millions over millions, and then you are presented these timelines with, let's just say, 10 alleged attacks over the last couple of 10 years, and then you even find there are some that cannot even be categorized as OT attacks. And we are talking about documented, confirmed attacks, not just rumor. And rumor for me is, oh, no, just trust me. No, I've seen the evidence. Well, if you have seen the evidence, then just share it. You can do your sanitization, and then probably we might be inclined to trust you. And then it should also, if you think about attacks that did have a non-trivial impact, extremely low, and attacks that didn't involve public internet exposure. Okay, so that number is extremely low. That's a fact. And now, unfortunately, that fact goes contrary to the beliefs that many people in our space have, and that creates tension. So I would imagine that almost everybody in OT security at some point in their career thinks, wow, this is super important, just like myself, right? So super important. We have to do something about this. We have to just solve this mess, this risk. Okay. And because that's so super important, and your expectation is, well, it is really not that difficult, so we should see lots of attacks, but then reality looks differently. And then this creates a conflict in your brain. And unfortunately, for many people, emotions are involved. And this tension then results to something that is called cognitive dissonance, where you have to somehow try to resolve this conflict. It's even another category if there is also financial investment on top of that. So not just the emotional investment, but also the financial investment, because you have put money in that service offering or in your product offering. Let's just say you are a venture capitalist. Then I can tell you, my friends, you don't like this reality that the number of cyber physical attacks is extremely low, because that means you will see less demand for your offerings than if the number would be substantial, because everybody would want to buy your stuff. And how do you resolve this conflict? And I'll show you what's going to happen. So there are basically three strategies. So the first strategy, and this is just in your heads, right? The first strategy is denial. So you just claim, oh, there are hundreds of cyber physical attacks. You just don't see them. Well, because we only have the data, it's confidential, we can't tell you. Or that's the classic Joe Wise argument. No, they're just disguised as operational failures. And if you don't know Joe Wise, Google him, check him out on the internet. For me, it's really fascinating, because Joe maintains for, I think, about 20 years that he has this database of hundreds of cyber physical attacks that disguise as operational failures, misconfigurations, etc. Unfortunately, he has never made this claim credible by showing his database, which I'm sorry, Joe, I suppose it's just an Excel sheet. So again, it boils down to trust me, just trust me. It's real. But that's not good enough. But this is how some people cope. No. That's so these timelines with the 10 incidents. No, that's not real. It's much more. And then you also throw in those attacks that have nothing to do with OT, like Colonial Pipeline, Oldsmar, which was debunked. So you're just filling up that space, because certainly you experience it's very low, and then therefore you come up with nonsense like Colonial Pipeline, which everybody knows did not affect OT systems, right? So why would you do that? Why would you include Colonial Pipeline if you had 500 actual cyber physical attacks to point to? And then you run into taboos that what you are obviously not allowed to discuss, or even ask the vendor, well, what is your ratio of false positive alerts? I would be interested in that. So if you're using an OT threat detection solution, you will see alerts all the time. Now, if on the other hand, the number of actual cyber-physical attacks is so small, then you can certainly expect that you will see false positive alerts all the time. This is, I believe, a discussion that we should have. This is certainly data that the OT threat detection vendors have, but they don't talk about that. They talk about the emerging threats and the risk, etc., but they don't talk about the performance or the value of their offerings. All signs how people try to address this conflict between what you have in your mind and what you know as a fact, this very low number of actual cyber-physical attacks that fit my criteria and also Dale's criteria. I'm very happy that Dale addresses this topic, because I no longer feel so totally alone. The next strategy to get your brain a little bit in comfort here is deflection. And you have all seen that. You have seen it over and over again. Imagine what could have happened, right? So this is almost in every single reporting on an alleged cyber-physical attacks. Actually, it didn't result in any damage, but imagine what could have happened. And then, one paragraph later, you are looking at Armageddon. You are looking at the state of Florida being poisoned. The water supply was poisoned by those attackers. That could have happened. I mean, that's what you can actually read, and it simply tells you, whenever you read this, imagine what could have happened. It clearly tells you what actually did happen was nothing. Now, don't get me wrong. I think it's probably worthwhile to consider the potential implications in order to assess risk, etc. But if it becomes the only headline for this whole story, then you're getting on shaky ground, right? Because if you see that for let's just say the 50th time, that in this reporting, you don't hear what actually happened, but you hear lots of what allegedly could have happened. Then you have this focus on intangible threats. So very simple thing. Just imagine we had 500 cyber-physical attacks on the record, confirmed, not exposed to the public internet, substantial damage. Do you think that anybody would be talking about the threats? They're ever evolving, right? That would not be a thing, because you would be much less talking about threats, which are intangible. You would be talking about those actual attacks, what actually happened there, and what you should learn from those attacks for your protective posture. And then we were talking about silly risk. What do I mean by that? That is risk that is simply totally blown out of proportion. We recently had a good example for this. Let me bring it up. With that Dragos report on financial risk. And I've just recently done a webcast on this. You will find it on our YouTube channel, where I talked about that 2025 OT Security Financial Risk Report. Silly risk. Why do I call it that? Because the number that you see here, $330 billion US, that is a number that they, or the partners that Dragos paid to do this report, that they arrived at by looking at a risk that is so rare that you expect it to only happen once in 250 years. That's what I call a silly risk, because, and seriously, who in our profession, or even as a layperson who is interested in that, you're talking about cybersecurity, you're talking about IT stuff, networking, etc. And now you're presenting something that you expect to happen, and that's verbatim in the report, right? So don't take my word for it, just look it up or just check my video where I cite the report, that you expect to happen once every 250 years. Guys, this is silly. This is silliness at its best. So that is what I mean by that. And then another very, very frequent coping strategies, you no longer have any rational arguments, so you substitute rational argument with fear. Let me also give you an example for that. My favorite fearmonger on LinkedIn, Harry Thomas. Please follow this guy if you need a good dose of fear-mongering. So this is what Harry a month ago posted about a particular CVE. And here is why OT teams should be losing sleep tonight. I especially love the tonight because it amplifies the urgency. So that is, you will know this, right? So, the sky is falling. And another very, very nice phrase from Harry, you should be terrified. And honestly, I have to say, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense because I don't want my security teams to be terrified. If I had the impression that they would be terrified, I would probably fire them, right? So just imagine you're going out with your platoon and they're terrified. No, I don't want to go. Oh, no. So that is, I believe, not how it works, and not the argument that you should be pushing. But I mean, my basic proposition is, why do you see this nonsense? And my answer is because of this this disconnect here from the facts and what people have in their minds. So this dissonance, as Leon Festinger called it, so the inventor of cognitive dissonance, this logical disconnect that creates tension in your brain. And I'm just describing how some people cope with that tension. So that is what you see. All of you have seen that over and over again, and you will continue to see that. And finally, you will also see delusion. Like the risk is real. Why is that delusional? Very simple, because that doesn't make any sense. Risk is not real or unreal. It's either high or low. So if you use language like this, you are simply signaling that you have exited the rational conversation. So now you live in your own sphere, and certainly with many others, so you will have lots of friends there. And you use your own language, like the risk is real. Problem is, you will not be able to convince anybody with such an argument because it doesn't make sense. Again, risk cannot be real or unreal. Risk is either high or low, or the hyperbole. So let's just say you are running your esteemed company with threat detection products and services. You will most likely have a very high rate of false positive alerts. And then you claim that what you're doing will actually or does safeguard civilization. That's, if you ask me, pretty hyperbolic. Just recently, Clarity just topped this. I thought it wouldn't be possible, but Clarity actually topped the Dragos claim. So now Clarity claims to safeguard life itself. Wow. So and that leaves me wondering two things. Does that mean if Clarity or Dragos would go away, now our civilization or life as such would go down the toilet? And the other thing that I wonder is, just from a market participant, let's just say you as an asset owner, you're intending to make an investment in OT security. Would you invest because you want to safeguard civilization? Now, if I'm the CEO, I would say no. That's not my problem. I'm not responsible for safeguarding civilization or life in itself. So for me, a very strange value prop. But I think you may agree that this is totally overblown hyperbole. And why would it come to that? In my opinion, it's just because the basic value that you provide appears maybe to yourself not good enough. So therefore, you have to top it with something intangible and something that is phenomenal, right? It's so big, so huge that you probably think, well, no, that's a cause worth fighting for. To me, it reminds me of a very nice line of one of my favorite movies, which I will just play for you.
Sometimes I see him dance around the house in my underwear. Doesn't make me Madonna. Never will.
Yeah, so this is how I view it. Sorry. So I think it's just way over the top. And then finally, just to round it up here, viewing yourself as a superhero, I mean, if it makes you happy, just continue doing it. But I can tell you one thing: I don't view myself as a superhero. I view myself just as somebody doing his job in a very, very bizarre field. I never thought of myself as some kind of genius when I cracked Stuxnet. I was surprised that I got so much pushback in the days, because you may not know that, but people attacked me. No, he's gone crazy. But I just thought I'm doing my job here, nothing more, nothing less. So I don't think it's good for your psyche, for your personality, if you view yourself as a genius, superhero, or whatnot, just because you are working in OT security. That's not healthy, guys. If you have this feeling, try to move away from it. You are just another professional in what I think a very important field, but you're not Superman. And you don't need Superman in order to fix this mess. Yeah, and then finally, you have also heard it over and over again, when you realize, well, with your arguments, you really don't get a lot of traction. Then the standard argument is, they don't get it. They're just too stupid. And that could be the CEO of the company that you work for. It could be your customer, whatever. But they are just too stupid or simple-minded. They don't get the risk or whatever, or your great idea on how to solve all of this. And I think that's not a really good argument or a good proposition, because it will solidify your outsider existence, where you have pretty much given up the idea that you will be able to convince or persuade others, like for example your customers, why what you're offering them is worthwhile and maybe also necessary. So I want to leave you with this. To sum it up, I think, unfortunately, a lot of our discussions in OT security have become quite bizarre. That's the impression that I have. And what I try to do is give you a couple of reasons why it might have come to that. And at the end of the day, it seems to be the simple fact that we are seeing a very, very low number of actual cyber physical attacks. Why is that? I mean, you should be as happy about it as I am, and then position yourself accordingly. So that's my advice for the day. See you next week. Bye-bye.